Hello, chapter 42 is about the German perfect tense, one of the German past tenses. Willkommen zu Abschnitt 42 und hier geht es das Perfekt. This chapter is about the German perfect tense, which is very similar to the English perfect tense, but not exactly the same. So let's have a look here at the introduction, die Einleitung. So the perfect tense, this is a past tense in German, Vergangenheitsform. We use the perfect tense when we speak. So it is, we will not find the perfect tense in books, for example, or in articles and so on. This is for spoken language. We have another past tense which we use for written language. Okay, so that's why you cannot say that that we use the German perfect tense exactly the same way as it is used in English, although how we form it is very similar. So what you need to know is when you speak, you use the perfect tense. There are also some exceptions. Sometimes we use the other past tense, which we will learn, but which is Präteritum. But the most important difference is that the perfect tense in German we use for spoken language. Okay, and then it's also if it is an action or something that happened in the past that might still has an effect on today. Okay, it's written here, in der Vergangenheit passiert und könnte noch eine Auswirkung auf heute haben. Could have an effect on today still. Okay, this is when we use the German perfect tense. Then let's have a look at how we construct the German perfect tense. So for that you need the verb haben, and then you also need the verb, the Partizip zwei for that. The Partizip zwei, this is a special form of a verb, and it does not change. Well, once you have created or constructed the Partizip zwei or participle two in English, it stays like that. It does not change. You don't conjugate it anymore. And you will need it also later on for other parts of the German grammar. So it's very important to learn how to use the Partizip zwei and how to form it. Okay, so this is what you need for the German perfect tense. The verb haben, you have to conjugate it, and then you need the Partizip zwei. Or we also, in other cases, we use it with the sein, which is to be, and the Partizip zwei. And this is in the case when we use verbs of movement, when you are moving from A to B. So it's not officially it said Verben der Bewegung, or in English verbs of movement, but actually almost all kinds of activities include a movement. Cooking, for example, writing, it's also kind of movement, but it's not about that kind of movement. It's about the movement when you basically transport your body from A to B. This is the movement that is meant here. Okay, like swimming, flying, running, jogging, and so on. That are the verbs of movement, when you move from one place to another. And there are also a few exceptions which we will learn here in this chapter. There are a few exceptions which we also use with the sein, although there are no verbs of movement. Okay, so this is what you need to know. It's very similar to the English perfect tense, because there you also need have, like I have forgotten. Ich habe vergessen, it would be in the German perfect tense. So in English you also use have, or the German haben. It's very similar. But let's have a look at how we construct the regular Partizip zwei, regelmäßiges Partizip zwei. So what you need for that? First, you need the verb stem, or the Verbstamm in German. Okay, this is the first thing that you need. I hope you remember when we learned at the beginning how to conjugate regular verbs or verbs in general. There it's the same case. You also need the stem of the verb before you start conjugating. Here it's exactly the same. So if you take, for example, lernen, here the verb stem is lern, right? So you have to add at the beginning of the Partizip zwei, you have to put this prefix ge, it's called prefix. By itself it doesn't mean anything, it's just here called prefix. And at the end of the verb stem you add a t. Okay, this is how we form the Partizip zwei. So let's have a look at those examples here. So lernen is to learn. So the verb stem is lern. The Partizip 2 is gelernt. You add the ge at the beginning, and at the end of the stem comes the t. And then in order to form a sentence, you need the verb haben for that. So ich habe Deutsch gelernt means I have studied German. Ich habe Deutsch gelernt. What you need to know is for a main clause, for a normal main clause, you start with the subject, you continue with haben if you use the perfect tense, you have to conjugate it, and at the end, at the very end, always comes the Partizip 2. It takes the last position in a normal main clause. Okay, so you always have to keep this word order in mind, that the Partizip 2 takes the last position. Then another example, kochen, for example, another regular Partizip 2 verb. Kochen means to cook. So the verb stem is koch, and then it becomes gekocht. You add the ge at the beginning, and at the end of the stem comes the t. So gekocht, Isabel hat eine Suppe gekocht. Isabel has cooked a soup. Sie hat eine Suppe gekocht. Here you see again the word order, the Partizip 2 comes at the end. Spielen, then the next one is to play. The verb stem is spiel. If it was a noun, das Spiel, it means the game. Okay, and spielen means to play. So Spiel is the verb stem. You add ge at the beginning, at the end of the stem the t, and it becomes gespielt. Stefan hat Fußball gespielt. Stefan has played soccer. Okay, Stefan hat Fußball gespielt. This is how we form the regular Partizip 2. Okay. So then we have another special rule. So even if you have a regular Partizip 2 verb, whenever the stem ends with a d, t, m, or n, whenever it has this ending, you have to add an extra e at the end of the like you have to add et at the end of the Partizip 2. It's not just a t anymore. You have to add an et. It's for the pronunciation. There is a very similar rule for the regular verbs in the present tense. I hope you remember. Like if you say arbeiten, it ends. The stem also ends with a t, as you see here. Then you would say arbeitet. Right? You add an extra e there. You don't just put a t as it would usually be, but you have to add an extra t. So here, this is kind of the same rule. Whenever it ends with d, t, m, or n, you have to add an extra e here. So let's have a look at, for example, reden, which means to talk. The stem ends with a d. So as you see here, Endung, it's the ending. The stem ends with a d. So the Partizip 2 is geredet. Okay, it's not just geredet, because it would be very difficult to pronounce it if there was a dt at the end. That's why it is geredet for the pronunciation. It's just easier to say the word then. Arbeiten, to work. So here the stem ends with a t, as you see. So it also becomes gearbeitet. Okay. Atmen means to breathe. Here the stem ends with an m, so you have to say geatmet. Rechnen, to calculate, it becomes gerechnet, okay, because it ends with an n. So please keep this rule in mind. Of course, you will have to study which Partizip 2 verbs are regular and which are not. It comes with the time. It would be great if you start with the verbs that you have here in this course, and then of course you continue working on them and learn more with each new course, or like each higher level that you reach of the German language. Okay, so let's have a look at the next slide. So all verbs that end with ieren, like here studieren, kommunizieren, telefonieren, we have probieren. There's quite a number of German verbs that end with ieren. So whenever you have this case, you don't add a ge, you don't add the prefix ge at the beginning of the stem. Okay, so you just need the stem and then you add a t at the end. So studieren, for example, it becomes studiert. You just take the stem, which is studier, and then you add a t. And then it becomes studiert. So we don't say gestudiert. Okay, just keep this in mind, please. There's no ge in this case. So let's have a look at some examples. So studieren. Okay, keep in mind that you have to look for the complete ending here, not just the en, because basically almost all verbs in German end with an en. It's about then whether there's ieren, the complete part ieren. So studieren means to study, if it's to study at university, or if you are studying something very closely, like you're studying a map, then we would say eine Mappe oder einen Stadtplan studieren. Okay, but otherwise, if you learn something, if you learn German, like with this course, for example, you would say ich lerne Deutsch. You use lernen. You don't use studieren in this case. Usually we use studieren if you want to say what you study at university. You can say ich studiere Medizin. I study medicine. That it means this is what you study at university. Okay, just to keep the difference in mind between lernen and studieren. So here the verb stem is studier. Right? After we take away the en, it's studier, and we add the t at the end. So you don't take away the complete ending. Here the verb stem is still studier. It's not stut. Okay, just to keep in mind. The verb stem is always after taking away the en. So here the verb stem is studier, you add a t, studiert. We don't say gestudiert, but just studiert. So unsere Tochter hat Medizin studiert. Our daughter has studied medicine. Unsere Tochter, our daughter, that's the subject here. We start with the subject. Then comes the verb, which is haben. Haben, you have to conjugate haben. And at the very end comes the Partizip 2. The next one, kommunizieren, is to communicate. So the stem here is kommunizier, right? After taking away the en, it's kommunizier. The Partizip 2 is kommuniziert, with a t at the end. Sie haben miteinander kommuniziert. They communicated with each other. Telefonieren, to talk with someone on the phone. It does not mean to call somebody. It just means to be when you're already on the phone and you're already talking to the person, then it's telefonieren. If you call somebody, it's jemanden anrufen. Okay, so this is like actually talking with someone on the phone. So here the verb stem is telefonier. You add a t at the end and it becomes telefoniert. Sabine hat mit ihrer Nachbarin telefoniert. Sabine talked to her female neighbor on the phone. Okay, so this is a special rule which you have to keep in mind. Then the next slide. Here we have regular Partizip 2 verbs with sein. Okay, regelmäßiges Partizip 2 mit sein. The gender of Partizip 2 is neutral. It's das Partizip 2. That's why it's regelmäßiges Partizip 2 mit sein. So here, as you remember, I told you the verbs of movement and a few exceptions need to be formed with the sein in the perfect tense. So here we are going to look at the regular Partizip 2 verbs with the sein. Okay, so for example, aufwachen, which means to wake up, we use that with the sein. So ist früh aufgewacht. You have to keep in mind how you conjugate the word sein and haben in order to form the perfect tense. Okay, so you would say ist früh aufgewacht. It's a separable verb. Later on in this chapter, I will show you how to form the Partizip 2 of separable verbs. Okay, ist früh aufgewacht. Just for you a hint already, as you see, the prefix ge now is in the middle of the actual prefix of the verb and the stem. Okay, ist früh aufgewacht. He woke up early. Auswandern means to emigrate. Die Familie ist nach Brasilien ausgewandert. The family emigrated to Brazil, or has emigrated to Brazil if you want to use it in the perfect tense in English. Okay, then jemandem begegnen. As you see, JDM, this is a dative verb, jemandem begegnen, so to whom it means to come across someone, so to whomever you come across needs to be put in the dative case. So ich bin ihm begegnet, I came across him. Ich bin ihm begegnet. Explodieren, to explode. Die Bombe ist explodiert. As you see, there are some exceptions. Now, this is aufwachen, has nothing to do with moving your body from A to B, right? So it's or explode neither. So it's there are some exceptions here, but later on here there are also some actual verbs of movement. So explodieren means to explode. Die Bombe ist explodiert. The bomb exploded. Okay. Then jemandem folgen, that's again a dative verb. Folgen means to follow, to whomever you follow or somebody follows. It needs to be put in the dative. So sie sind dem Geruch gefolgt. It means they followed the smell. So they followed the smell. So Geruch here, it's what they followed. So it needs to be put in the dative. Klettern means to climb. So folgen is actually a verb of movement where you're moving your body from A to B. Okay, it's not just one of the exceptions. Klettern the same, to climb, you're moving again your body from A to B. So that's a verb of movement. Ihr seid auf den Berg geklettert. You climbed the mountain. Ihr seid auf den Berg geklettert. Landen means to land. Wir sind 15 Uhr gelandet. We landed at 3 p.m. Then reisen, to travel. This is also an actual verb of movement, to travel. Meine Schwester ist viel gereist. My sister has traveled a lot. Sie ist viel gereist. And then the last sentence, wandern, to hike, also an actual verb of movement. So here, früher sind sie täglich gewandert. In the past, they hiked daily. Früher sind sie täglich gewandert. Okay? So it would be great if you study the Partizip 2 here of this list and all the other lists that are coming in this chapter. Okay, so that are just a few examples. They are more regular Partizip 2 verbs that you use with design and the perfect tense. This is now for the A1 level, the very important ones, but the list is longer actually. Okay, so here. Here we have irregular Partizip 2 verbs with design. Okay, so here, for example, bleiben, to stay. Later on, we are going to see how to form the irregular Partizip 2 verbs. But just for you to study those already, that you know those are irregular, but they are still with design. Es ist so geblieben, with the irregular verbs, the stem changes here from bleib to blieb, as you see, and the ending is en. It's not t anymore. Okay, the stem most of the time changes, not always, but most of the time, but the ending is en. So whenever you see that the ending is en, it means that it's an irregular Partizip 2 verb. The regular ones end with a t. We have also mixed verbs. We will learn about them in one of the next slides. Okay, so just for you to study, that are the irregular ones with design. Es ist so geblieben, it stayed like that. So, by the way, means like that. Like, this is the best translation for that. You cannot use the English so the same way as the German so, because many people start sentences with so, I would like to do this, and then they say in German so, ich möchte das gerne machen. But in German it does not work like that. The best translation from the English so, when you start a sentence, for example, would be also in German, just also. Okay, but so means actually like that in German. Just not to confuse it with the English so. Okay. So fahren, to drive. Inge ist nach Hamburg gefahren. Inge drove to Hamburg. Again with the sein. Here is the Partizip 2. The stem has not changed because there are also some irregular Partizip 2 verbs that do not change in the verb stem, but the ending is always en. Okay. Nach Hamburg, to Hamburg. Please don't forget the preposition nach means to, but just if you go to a country or a city. Okay, just for countries and cities. Fallen, to fall. Franz ist vom Stuhl gefallen. Franz fell from the chair. Ist vom Stuhl gefallen. So here also the stem has not changed, but the ending is en. Fliegen, to fly. Wir sind nach Köln geflogen. We flew to Cologne. Gehen, to go. Ihr seid nach Hause gegangen. You went home. Or you have gone home, if you want to say it in the perfect tense in English. Okay, ihr seid nach Hause gegangen. As you see here, they are all irregular, so you would have to study those, please, okay? Because you need it later on also for the passive tenses, for example, in German. So it's very useful. You will need it later on, not just for the perfect tense, but also for the other past tense that we have, the third past tense, for the passive, for example, and so on. Kommen means to come. Die Gäste sind zu spät gekommen. The guests came too late. Laufen means to run or to walk. Die Pferde sind in den Stall gelaufen. The horses run in the barn. Sein, to be. Dein Onkel ist noch nie in Singapur gewesen. Your uncle has never been to Singapore. And then springen, as you see here, gewesen, it's very irregular. From sein, it becomes gewesen. You actually would not recognize that anymore by the stem. Like here, of course, with all those words, you kind of can tell what the infinitive form is of those Partizip 2 verbs. But here, sein is very irregular. Okay, sein, the Partizip 2 is gewesen. Springen means to jump. Der Junge ist in die Pfütze gesprungen. It means the boy jumped into the pond. Er ist gesprungen. Okay? So please study also this slide and the Partizip 2 verbs here. The next slide here is about irregular Partizip 2 verbs without a vowel change. Okay? So the irregular ones, you have to add a G also at the beginning, then comes the stem, and then comes an EN. Very often, or most of the time, the irregular Partizip 2 verbs change in their verb stem. Okay, but here is a list of Partizip 2 verbs whose stem does not change. Okay, you recognize that they are irregular because of the ending EN. Which is exactly the same ending as of the infinitive verbs in German. So backen means to bake, gebacken, as you see. Tina hat einen Kuchen gebacken. Backen oder etwas backen, to bake something, whatever you bake needs to be put in the accusative case. It's an accusative verb. So here, Kuchen, the cake is masculine, der Kuchen, so it becomes einen Kuchen in the accusative. Okay. The same with braten, it's also an accusative. Essen is an accusative verb, fangen is an accusative verb, geben is dative, and so on. But let's have a look at the sentences here. So braten, to fry, becomes gebraten. Okay, so actually it all stays the same as in the infinitive braten. What you have to add is the G, the prefix G at the beginning. Okay, die Köche haben leckeren Fisch gebraten. The chefs fried tasty fish. So der Koch is the chef, but in German der Chef, if you talk about der Chef in German, it means the boss. Okay, just not to confuse. The English chef is the German Koch, and the German chef is the English boss. Okay, just not to confuse those words. So the next one is essen. It becomes gegessen. Wir haben alle Waffeln gegessen. Fangen means to catch. Gefangen, sein Hund hat den Ball gefangen. Geben means to give. Ich habe dir viele Geschenke gegeben. Geben is a dative verb. To whomever you give something needs to be put in the dative case. Halten, it's an accusative verb. Carolina hat eine schwere Box in ihren Händen gehalten. Okay, gehalten. Halten also can mean stop and hold. Lesen means to read, gelesen. Wir haben schon sehr viele Bücher gelesen. Messen, to measure, gemessen. Christina hat gemessen, wie groß das Zimmer ist. So Christian measured how big his room is. Wie means how, so Christian hat gemessen, wie groß das Zimmer ist. Raten means to advise or to guess. Geraten, deine Mutter hat dir geraten, einen Regenschirm, hold on, sorry, deine Mutter hat dir geraten, einen Regenschirm mitzunehmen. Your mother advised you to take an umbrella with you. Okay, so here, jemandem etwas raten, to whomever you advise something needs to be put in the dative. That's why here it's dir, because she advised it to you, so you don't say du, but you say dir. Okay, because jemandem etwas raten, to advise something to somebody, it's a dative verb. So in the next slide, here, just a second, yeah. So here we have irregular Partizip 2 without a vowel change. Here it just continues a little bit. There are a few more Partizip 2 verbs of this group. So schlafen, to sleep, becomes geschlafen. Meine Großeltern haben immer sehr wenig geschlafen. Okay, you always have the translation here. Schlagen means to hit somebody, or also to beat somebody, for example, in a competition, would also mean schlagen, could be also schlagen. So geschlagen, mein Neffe hat meine Nichte geschlagen. Okay, dann sehen, to see, gesehen. Wir haben in Deutschland viele Schlösser gesehen. Okay, we have seen many castles in Germany. Tragen means to care or to worry. to wear, sorry, to carry or to wear. So it's getragen. Gestern hat Patricia eine gelbe Hose getragen. Okay. And waschen means to wash. It becomes gewaschen. Du hast deine Socken selten gewaschen. You rarely washed your socks. Okay, du hast deine Socken selten gewaschen. Okay. Good. Then the next slide. Now we have irregular participle 2 verbs with the vowel change. Okay. So here, for example, as you see, we have to use ge at the beginning of the participle 2. Then comes the stem with the vowel change, and at the end comes an en. So here we have an example. Schreiben means to write. It becomes geschrieben in its participle 2 form. So as you see, we have added the ge, then the stem has changed from schreib to schrieb, and at the end comes en. Okay, geschrieben. Let's have a look at this list here, which you should study, please. So brechen means to break. Gebrochen, okay, you see brech changes to broch, and it's always different. There is not a rule that all verbs that have an e in their stem change to I or change to o in their participle 2 form, the irregular ones, right? There is not a rule like that. You would have to learn it. Okay, a little bit by heart, unfortunately. So brechen means to break. It becomes gebrochen. Der Athlet hat sein Bein gebrochen. Then gelten, to apply to. Gegolten. Diese Regel hat früher nicht gegolten. I will just read the sentences in German to you, just for you to get used to the sound of the German language. Okay, and then you have the translations here that you can have a look at. So helfen means to help, geholfen. Der Lehrer hat seinen Schülern geholfen. Jemandem helfen, it's a dative verb, so to whomever you help needs to be put in the dative. That's why the students here, the teacher helped his students. The students are the ones who receive help, so they are the dative object here. And the plural form is seinen, and then you have to add an extra n in the plural form of nouns which you put in the dative case, right? Because der Schüler means the male student and die Schüler means the students, so the form is equal, okay, whether it's singular or plural. But here in the dative you have to add an extra n. Please keep this rule in mind. Nehmen means to take. It becomes genommen. Now this is very irregular here, as you see. Wir haben etwas genommen. We have taken something. Schmelzen means to melt. And becomes geschmolzen. Das Eis ist geschmolzen. The ice cream melted. Now schmelzen is one of the verbs of the exceptions that we have to form with sein. Okay. Sprechen means to speak. Gesprochen. Diese Frau hat über dich gesprochen. Stechen means to sting. Gestochen. Die Wespe hat Klaus gestochen. Sterben means to die. Gestorben. Sein Trainer ist gestorben. This is also one of the verbs that we have to form with the sein in the participle, with the participle 2, or in the perfect tense. The next one is treffen. It means to meet. Wir haben uns gestern Nachmittag getroffen. We met yesterday afternoon. So treffen, if you want to meet somebody, if you plan to meet somebody, if the meeting is planned, it's reflexive in German. That's why it is wir haben uns. It means we have met each other or ourselves, let's say. It's a reflexive verb in German. But if you meet somebody accidentally, let's say, on the street without planning it before, without making an appointment, for example, then it's not reflexive. You can say, ich habe ihn auf der Straße getroffen. I met him on the street and it was just occasional. It was not planned. And it's not then it's not reflexive. But if you plan it, if you make an appointment to meet somebody, then it's reflexive. Okay. Werfen means to throw. It becomes geworfen. Der Spieler hat den Ball geworfen. The player threw the ball. Okay. Then the next slide. Here we have mixed participle 2 verbs, oder gemischtes Partizip 2. Now here they are called mixed because they have something of the regular and something of the irregular participle 2 verbs. If you look here, we have the word brennen, which means to burn. It becomes gebrannt. So as you see, the stem has changed It does not always have to change, but here it has changed. And then we have the ending T. Okay, T is for the regular verbs, and here the stem changes as with the irregular verbs. Excuse me. So, brennen, to burn, becomes gebrannt. Das Papier hat gebrannt. The paper has burned. Bringen means to bring. Gebracht, der Kellner hat das Essen gebracht. He has brought the food. So here you see the stem has changed, but the ending stem has changed as with the irregular ones. The ending is T as with the regular verbs in the Partizip 2 form. Denken means to think. It becomes gedacht. Der Lehrer hat viel gedacht. Kennen means to know. The Partizip 2 form is gekannt. Wir haben viele Menschen gekannt. Mögen becomes gemocht. Ich habe früher Schokolade gemocht. Wissen, to know, becomes gewusst. Diese Frau hat viel gewusst. This woman has known a lot. Okay, so this is what the mixed Partizip 2 verbs are about. Okay, they have something of the regular and the irregular ones. The next slide here is about the non-separable verbs and their Partizip 2 form. Okay, so here we have to use the prefix of the verb. We don't use the prefix ge as for the other verbs in the Partizip 2 form. Okay, you just keep the prefix that you have of the separable verbs. I hope you remember what the separable and non-separable verbs are. If not, please revise the chapter about the non-separable and separable verbs. Okay, so here it's about the non-separable verbs. As you know, the non-separable verbs have a prefix already. We add a prefix at in front of the actual verb, and then the meaning changes. Okay, so here beginnen means to begin or to start. For example, it's a non-separable verb. When we start conjugating it, we don't separate it. Right? So you need the actual prefix of the verb, you need the stem, and the ending T or EN. So the non-separable verbs in the Partizip 2 form, they can be regular, irregular, and they can be mixed. Okay, this is what you have to keep in mind. So that's why the ending is either T as with the regular Partizip 2 and with the mixed Partizip 2 verbs, or it can be EN if it's an purely irregular Partizip 2 verb. Okay, and the verb stem of course can change in its Partizip 2 form. This is what you would have to learn. So here beginnen, it's irregular, right? Because the stem has changed and the ending is en. Das Spiel hat begonnen. The game has started. Beginnen becomes begonnen. So please don't forget, you don't add a ge here, the ge which we usually use for the Partizip 2 verb. Besuchen becomes besucht. This is regular here. The verb stem does not change and the ending is t. Hannah hat ihren Bruder im Krankenhaus besucht. Erklären, to explain, becomes erklärt. It's also regular. The stem has not changed and the ending is t. So sie hat es dir noch nie erklärt. Empfehlen means to recommend. And it becomes empfohlen. Now this one is irregular because the stem has changed and the ending is en. Der Kellner hat uns das Schnitzel empfohlen. Geschehen, to happen. It becomes geschehen. This one is irregular because the ending is en. All Partizip 2 verbs that have the ending en are irregular, although the stem has not changed. Es ist nichts geschehen. Nothing happened. Gewinnen means to win. It becomes gewonnen. This is irregular because the stem has changed and the ending is en. Du hast eine Auszeichnung gewonnen. Verdienen means to earn. Becomes verdient. It's regular. The stem has not changed. The ending is t. Jutta hat letztes Jahr viel Geld verdient. Vergessen means to forget and becomes vergessen. This one is irregular, although the stem has not changed. But whenever the ending is en, it means that it's irregular. I'm sorry, I hope I don't repeat myself too often. I just want to make sure that you learn what the regular, irregular, and mixed Partizip 2 verbs are. The more often you hear it, the better you will keep it in your mind. Okay, so ich habe das total vergessen. I totally forgot that, or I have totally forgotten that in the English perfect tense. Verlieren, to lose, becomes verloren. As you know, it's irregular, right? The stem has changed, the ending is en. Susanne hat wieder ihre Schlüssel verloren. Susanne lost her keys again. So then verstehen, to understand, it becomes verstanden. Okay, the stem has changed, the ending is en, so it is an irregular verb. Ich habe nichts verstanden, I haven't understood anything. Okay. I hope that you will not say that you have not understood anything after this chapter. But you, of course, the good thing is that you can watch that as often as you want and to repeat and study those Partizip 2 verbs. Okay, so now in this slide, it's about the separable verbs in the Partizip 2 form. So now let's have a look at how we construct that. So you need, first of all, the actual prefix of the separable verb, right? Again, I would advise you, if you don't quite remember what the prefixes of the separable and non-separable verbs are, that you revise the chapter about the non-separable and separable verbs. Okay, because you need to know which verbs belong to the separable and which verbs belong to the non-separable verbs in order to construct the Partizip 2 in the correct way. Okay, so you need the actual prefix of the separable verb, which here aufmachen would be auf. Right? Then you add ge, then comes the stem. It could be regular or irregular, depends on whether the separable verb in its Partizip 2 form is regular, irregular, or mixed. Again, it can be all three of them. And then you add a T if it's regular, or an en if it's irregular, or T also for the mixed Partizip 2 verbs. Okay, so here, aufmachen means to open. Aufgemacht, this is the Partizip 2 form of it. So as you see, you have the actual prefix of the verb, which is auf, then you add ge, then comes the stem, and then comes the T at the end. So this Partizip 2 form here is regular. Okay? The stem has not changed and the ending is T. Aufgemacht. Der Verkäufer hat den Laden aufgemacht. Mitbringen, to bring with. So here the prefix is mit. So it becomes mitgebracht. This one is mixed here because the stem has changed, but the ending is T. So this verb here is mixed. Ich habe die Zutaten mitgebracht. I've brought the ingredients with me. The next one is anrufen, to call somebody. Now this is when you call somebody on the phone. Anrufen, it becomes angerufen. This one is irregular because the ending is en, although the stem has not changed. Der Chef hat Herrn Schneider angerufen. Okay, the boss called Mr. Schneider. As you see here, der Chef is the boss, right? It's not the cook. The one who cooks there. So aufstehen means to stand or to get up. Has two meanings, so it becomes aufgestanden. It's irregular, the stem has changed, the ending is en. Tobias ist spät aufgestanden. Tobias woke up late. Okay, so you have to form this one here with sein, because it belongs to a verb of movement, where you're moving yourself from the position of standing to getting up, or to standing up. Aufstehen. Okay, to stand up or to get up. This is what it means. Aufstehen. Have to form it with sein. Okay, and of course, the separable and non-separable verbs, they can also be at the same time verbs of movement. Okay, it's of course also possible. So you have to keep several rules in mind. Okay, you always have to kind of look at a verb and then think: is it now a regular, irregular, or mixed verb? Is it a separable and non-separable, or just a normal verb? And then you have to think: is it a verb of movement or is it not? Or does it belong to one of the exceptions which have to be formed with sein in the perfect tense? So there are certain things you have to consider before you form the Partizip 2 form. I know at the beginning it's maybe a little bit complicated and many things to think of and many things to consider, but it will come with the time. Everything takes its practice, so please don't give up and practice that, and then it will come automatically. Okay, but of course it takes practice. In German we have a saying, it says kein Meister ist vom Himmel gefallen, which means no master fell from heaven or from the skies. So in order to master the German language, of course you need to practice that. Okay? So that was the chapter about the German perfect. And please watch this video several times and study all the verbs that you have seen in the charts here. They are very important because if you want to talk about the past, of course you need to use that. And don't forget, das Perfekt, the German perfect tense, the biggest difference to the Präteritum, the other past tense that we have a third one, but let's say those two are the most important ones. The biggest difference is that the perfect tense, the German perfect tense, we use in spoken language. Präteritum or imperfect, the other past tense, is more for written language. Okay, that are the biggest differences between those two. It's not exactly the same difference as with the English simple past and the English perfect tense. Okay, because the simple past in English, it has nothing to do whether it's written language or spoken language. Like in general, the past tenses in English, it's not about that as it is in German. In English, it's more whether it's completely over, like the simple past. If you say I went to Australia, it's over, it's done, has nothing to do with that. Or if you say I have gone to Australia, and then we use the perfect tense in English in order to say that there is some connection to today, although it happened in the past. Okay, so just keep this in mind. It's very similar to the English language, but it's not exactly the same. Okay, then I hope you enjoyed this chapter and I hope you learned many new things. And the perfect tense is super important because if you want to speak German, this is what you need, okay, if you want to talk about the past. Dann bis zum nächsten Abschnitt und bis bald. Tschüss.